people think you just go on ships and you're going to be, on this one, a tanker and then a container ship or whatever. There's so many different ones out there, and you can get really technical and really specialist and be on
Yeah.
like cable layers or, deep sea, ROV, all sorts of things. There's so much out there, such a massive industry.
Hello, and welcome back to the Off Course Pod, where we dive deep into the stories of inspiring individuals navigating the vast oceans and bustling ports of the world. Today, we're speaking with the master of one of the world's biggest container ships, Captain Mark Maguire, whose followers on Insta and TikTok get up close and personal with these mega ships. And here to help me host, of course, is Robert. Hi, Robert. What do you know about ultra-large container ships?
I mean, I know everything there is to know, Helen.
Do you now?
Yeah,
Do you?
well, hopefully you sense the sarcasm in that answer. Not a lot is the truth. And in fact, what I do know has probably come from Captain Mark's TikTok and some of the other influencers that we're having across this podcast series. Because, to be fair, having worked with Nautilus, I probably know a lot more now than ever before. But I still think there's such a huge huge questions over these. I mean, you look at the size of them, and I think some people do genuinely wonder how these ships, the size of them and the weight that they carry, how they do manage to stay afloat. So yeah, I think there's so much to discover within this container ships, because we know that they carry so much of the world's trade as well, and yet we probably know very little about what actually goes on.
Absolutely. I mean, I think container ships are the perfect example of just how out of sight, out of mind the maritime industry is. These massive, massive, great big ships, full to bursting of container boxes, 20-foot units, which are full of goods. It could be trainers, it could be phones, it could be lipsticks, it could be, all sorts of clothes and apparel and homeware, and anything that was within your house and your place of work has probably come on board one of these container ships. And yet we see so little of them. They're plying the world's oceans. They're coming in and out of our major ports in this country, and so few members of the public really get to see them up close and personal, if at all. So we're aware of this. We know that there is, this lack of awareness in the public because we have been surveying the British public for the last few years in our Nautilus Maritime Barometer report. And we do actually always ask people what percentage of goods do they think arrive into this country by sea. Why do you think we ask that, Robert?
I think we ask it because it's a really interesting data point, because people vastly underestimate just how important shipping is in terms of trade. And I think it's a really interesting one, because I think if you ask most people nowadays, they'd probably say that the travel that they undertake is either by rail or bus, or if they're going internationally, by plane. And so I guess people, maybe because that's how they travel, maybe they just tend to think that that's also how most of our trade travels, when actually it's not. It's shipping is, when we say that shipping is the backbone of the global economy, and certainly the backbone of the UK economy as an island nation, I mean, I think you're going to give us the figure, Helen, and the figure really, really speaks for itself.
Yeah, well, absolutely. It's always surprised me how many people think that our goods come in via plane, because it's so expensive. Air transport is, relatively very expensive. And then I guess where we might, the next most common mode of transport that we might think brings our good is on trucks, articulated lorries, right? But we're an island. You just said it. Those trucks, they can't come across the border. They only have limited access into the country, and most of the time that is on a ferry, which of course is via ship. So I guess that kind of explains some of the confusion out there, because this is what we see. We're on our motorways, we're driving in between towns or different parts of the country, and we don't put two and two together that many of those lorries would have had to come by vessel as well. So Robert, you're absolutely right. I do have the data. So I can tell you that in our 2022 Maritime Barometer report, people thought that 50% of the goods in this country that we consume come by sea, when actually it is well over 90% of the goods that we consume in this country. So a huge difference there.
It's a whopping number. It really is. You know, when you look around your house, anyone who's listening to this now, if you're sitting in your house, just have a look around. If you're, traveling, listening to this, look around. 90% of everything that you're looking at now, the likelihood is that it has come by sea, and it's not just has come by sea, but then obviously the most important point, it's has been delivered by seafarers. It's the people who are keeping this industry going, who are keeping our economy going. And I think, you know, if there's one thing that I guess that gets to the heart and the mission of our podcast, it's exactly this data set. I think speaks for it all. It's not just that 90% of goods come by sea. It's that 90% of goods come by sea, and it's that seafarers are at the heart of everything that we're able to do. And you know, this when it comes to Christmas time, and you look around, Christmas always, you know, the perfect example. When you look around and you see everything, you know, think of the seafarers who have been instrumental in delivering all those things to your house.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good link, Robert, because our guest today, Captain Mark Maguire, has worked on board some of the world's largest container ships with Maersk. He's been with them for more than 20 years. As we're recording this, he is currently at sea and hoping to be back at home with his family for Christmas. And we send him all the very best wishes and hope he can get back to see his loved ones for Christmas too. So more recently, Captain Mark has been sharing his world of work at sea with his followers on Instagram and TikTok. He describes his content as a really safe space in which to explore all things about working at sea. And I really hope that our viewers and our listeners enjoyed it as much as I do. So let's get into it. Hello, lovely people, and welcome to the Nautilus Pod. Today I'm speaking with Captain Mark Maguire, master mariner and captain of some of the world's largest container ships. Captain Mark has been documenting the highs and some of the lows of working at sea on his TikTok account and has achieved an absolutely huge following. You can see him as _captain_Mark. Hi, Mark. How you doing?
Hi, how are you? I'm great. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really well, thank you. Thanks for joining us today on the pod.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Can we start with perhaps what inspired you to pursue a career in maritime, and how did you get to become the big boss of some of these mega container ships?
I come from a big maritime area in West Cork. It's actually
Yep.
a tiny little village, but it's got a big maritime history.
Okay.
We've got a big presence here with the RNLI. One of the oldest RNLI stations in the country is located here in Cork-Mac-Sherry.
So RNLI being for people who may not know, because they may not be based in the UK.
Oh yes, yeah. So the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, and it covers all of the UK and Ireland also, and it's a voluntary organisation that rescues people at sea.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the heart of the community here. And then we have a lot of fishing boats going in and out, and we have a big maritime contingent living in the village as well, who work in yachts offshore and in the merchant navy like myself as well. And my brother, who's a few years my senior, he's a captain for Princess Cruises.
Nice.
So he went off to sea when I was a teenager. So when he came back with all his stories, I was like, okay, maybe that's the job for me. And my parents were like, yeah, you'd probably enjoy that. So they were pushing me towards it as well.
Okay.
So I did a very, very brief stint in the Irish Navy in military before I started off. And then I decided to bail out of that. And the opportunity came up to join what was called a seamanship course in the National Maritime College of Ireland in Ringaskiddy. That course doesn't exist anymore. They do nautical science now, but it was more or less the same thing, just a little bit more less intense, shall we say. The benefit of that course was that you only did 8 weeks in college before you went off and you did your first trip at sea.
Oh wow!
So you basically got your efficient deckhand course,
Yeah.
and then you were off.
They
So it was
literally
very
just
much.
threw you in the deep end.
It threw me in the deep end straight away. It joined in Tanjung Pali Pass, my first ship in 2001,
Wow.
and totally shell shocked.
Yeah, I
Didn't know
bet.
what was going on.
I bet.
I had only left the country twice, I think, in my life before that, So it was a brilliant experience to start off with, and really a trial by fire.
Mhm.
And it was great. And after that, I was pretty much hooked.
You caught
And
the bug.
yeah, and I've been out
Yeah.
since. And I went away with Maersk, and I've been with them since.
So you said you went away with Maersk. There's a couple of things that I think we need to, explain for our viewers and listeners. Maersk Containers, one of the biggest operators, if not the world's biggest operator container ships. I'm sure you can correct me
Second in the
there.
world now.
Second in the world. Who's the
Yeah.
biggest?
MSC is the biggest right now. Yeah.
MSC. Yeah, there
By
you go.
tonnage, that's it.
Tonnage meaning number of ships.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, many number of ships. So you got a job with one of the world's biggest container ship operators pretty soon into your career, and you've stayed with them ever since.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
sponsored me all the way through college, and they
Uh-huh.
gave me placements on board the ships,
Uh-huh.
and they gave us a job afterwards, and I've stuck around. So I've really enjoyed it. So
Yeah, that's
that's what
brilliant
I've been.
stuff. And now you're the captain of the ship. What does that mean to somebody who doesn't know anything about working at sea?
So the captain is the person in overall command of the ship. The buck stops here,
Oh,
shall we
yes.
say? Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and I'm the liaison between the shore side and everything that happens at sea.
Mm-hmm.
And if anything happens on board in an emergency, for example,
Yep.
I'm in charge of all that. I have to make sure everything's okay for the crew, plan the passages with our second officer to make sure we get from A to B when we're supposed to. Our budgets, very important these days, look after all the
Mm-hmm.
budgets on boards,
Yep.
and generally just be the person who's always there 24/7 should something go awry. And that's the main purpose of my job, is to be
Yeah.
overall commander. Yeah.
Yeah. So the buck stops with you. You're the person ultimately who is responsible for the ship, for its cargo, for the crew, for the safety, as you said, the planning and the money, for want of a
Yep.
better word, the budgets. Yeah.
Yep.
You're the
Yep.
ultimate responsibility. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a lot of responsibility. You are on board these huge ships, and I do recommend anybody who has not seen your content definitely go onto TikTok so you can get a visual understanding of how big these ships are. But for those viewers who haven't followed you yet, can you describe, just the sheer scale of what you're in charge of?
She's one of the post Panamax ships. So if you can think about the old style of vessels where you had the accommodation block and the bridge and everything towards the back of the ship, and then you had the rest of it on in front. These ones are now set up so that that's further towards the forward end, and then you have a funnel in the middle, and it just looks like a big Lego ship, basically. Big blue ship with lots of Lego blocks on top of it, and a bit of smoke puffing out on this end, and then a few windows up the front that we can look out at, and it's 353 meters long, 53
Wow.
meters wide, and we can
Wow.
carry just over 15,000 TEU, which are 20-foot containers. So if you think about 7,500 articulated lorry loads of containers on board any one time, above and below deck. So
I'm glad
she's
you said
pretty
that.
good.
Yeah, because I was
Yeah.
about to put it into context of a road vehicle, because that's probably how most people will see these shipping containers. They'll see a lorry going past them, or they will pass a lorry on the motorway, right? And think nothing of it. But this is, a single version of what you are carrying many thousands of on board your ship.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
so you can carry, in most holds, you can stack them 10 high under deck. So you can stack up 10 lorries and then 20 something wide, and then 10 high above deck again. So it's extremely large. Until you actually walk up next to one,
Yeah.
it's very hard to get a sense of scale and how big they are. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of it underwater as well as above water as well. They're very,
Yes.
very deep ships,
A lot that
The
you
largest
can't
ones in the
see.
world. Yeah, the largest ones now carry about 24,000 TEU. So they're getting bigger and bigger all the time. So that's 9,000 containers more than the ship I'm carrying, and that's
Wow.
already really, really big. So
Wow.
huge ships, yeah.
Huge. And most people would never have that ability to walk up alongside, right? It's not like the general public can get generally anywhere near these ships because they're in a port, it's a safe location, you don't have access. So to be able to fully understand that scale really is through videos like your own,
Exactly, yeah.
on social that they'll come in contact with them.
Yeah, because I've
Yeah.
done a lot of videos about it being a little bit of an invisible industry.
Yeah.
We have ISPS is a big thing, which is basically security around ships and
Right.
around the ports,
Right.
because there's lots of money involved and there's lots of potential for nefarious things to happen inside ports, and
Yeah.
smuggling, and the potential for them to be used as what we say, something for nefarious means, put something in the container like an explosive or anything like
Mm.
that. So it's
Mm.
extremely tight, and you
Mm.
can't just walk up. Years ago, you would go down into a city, and the
Mm.
ports were wide open, and you could walk past the ships,
Right.
and everything was wide open. There's still a few places like that, I guess. General cargo ships and that. If you go to Cork City, for example, you can have a walk along the quays. But container ports are very much locked away behind
Mm.
heavy security gates and that.
Mm.
And so what I wanted to do was give people a bit of visibility into an industry that is uh, hidden behind those gates.
Mm.
And it's been really positive. People are super, super interested, especially people who are in the transport industry and can get quite close, but
Yeah.
can never get in for an actual proper viewing. So
Right.
everybody's very appreciative of just being able to get up close to one of these things. Yeah.
Right. Well, I count myself, myself as part of that as well. I mean, I'm in the maritime industry. I've been reporting as a journalist on the maritime industry for nearly 20 years now, but I've never got as close as, that to one of these mega container ships. So yeah, I absolutely love the videos and the content that you're
Thank you.
doing. Yeah, no problem. And I'd love
It,
to
it's
see more.
it's funny because it's old rope for me, it's just one of those things that I do. It's my other life. I have my
Yep.
life here at home, and I
Yep.
have my life at sea.
Yeah.
And even the most simple things people are super interested in, like where we sleep, what we eat, how do the toilets work, that kind of thing. you know, you know?
Do you even have toilets?
We do. We definitely have toilets. Yeah.
Phew. Yeah, I mean, these are modern ships. We're not just talking about, some basic kinds of accommodation here, aren't we? Particularly working for a big company like Maersk. You've got all
Yeah.
the mod cons, don't you?
You really do, yeah. And
Yeah,
I've had guys who have commented saying they were at sea in the 70s and even the 80s,
yeah,
and it's completely different now. It looks much
right.
more comfortable, much cleaner. Everybody's got their own individual cabin with an ensuite. You've
Nice.
got you've got a cinema room and a gym. You get your 3 square meals a day. Even people are asking, like, do you have to pay for your food?
Yeah,
Which is something that we just take for granted. It's like, no,
yeah,
no, that's part of your employment, is that you get fed,
yes.
and you get somewhere to stay, and you get paid and all that, and
Mm,
they're, oh, okay, yeah, because
mm.
for some reason people just thought that you had, like working in an office, sometimes you might have to pay across, a couple of euros, a couple of pounds to get your sandwiches or whatever, but it's not like that.
Absolutely.
See, it's all covered. Yeah,
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 yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, that is a really good example there of the lack of awareness. And why should people know? I mean, how would you
yeah,
know unless you've been away to sea, right? But I mean, I'm an office worker. I don't get my lunch paid for, my dinner's paid for. So, there's got to be some perks of being away from home for so long. But I
yeah,
think you also raise an important point there because actually, until very recently, water wasn't something that you would be necessarily provided for free under regulations. It was only, I think, the Maritime Labour Convention, which is, a bit of international regulation that gives seafarers various benefits and protections while they're at sea. It was only within the last couple of years that it was updated to mandate that water must be free for
yeah.
seafarers,
Amazingly,
which is mad,
it is. Yeah, yeah. And MLC has really changed the game,
right?
for in a positive way for a lot of people, between rest hours, um, having ventilation, having, heating, water, all that kind of stuff. Everything that we take for granted
Yeah,
at home,
yeah,
that wasn't strictly provided for to everybody working at sea,
right.
and even getting paid, every month. things like that, So it's an extremely important piece of legislation that is very welcomed by us at sea. Yeah,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we have gone deep very quickly.
we have
But
actually.
MLC is absolutely, something that the trade union movement, supports and encourages. And Nautilus itself, we negotiate alongside other partners, trade union partners, on that international stage to try and tighten that regulation and get more protections for seafarers. So I'm really pleased to hear that it's
Yeah.
welcomed by, the people that it is being affected.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And best of luck to long may it continue.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah,
Yeah. So
amazing. So taking it back a little bit, there's kind of like two strands that I'd like to explore with you, if I may. If we can go back to what it is like working at sea as a captain and perhaps some of your responsibilities and experiences around that, and then we can go perhaps a little bit deeper into your video content and, some of maybe the more or most popular bits of content that you have posted. So starting with what it's like working at sea, for those people who might not be that aware of it, I guess. We've heard that you're got ultimate responsibility. That is safety, that is crew, that is the ship as well, plus a lot of the money aspects of the job. But how long are you typically away for? What is your rotation like, and where are you sailing to at the moment?
So I'm on quite a nice rotation at the moment. I do 3 months on, 3 months off
Yep.
usually,
Hmm.
and that it can be up to 4 months.
At sea.
Contractually, it's up. Yeah, yeah, up to
Hmm.
4 months, and I'm still given leave for that as well.
Nice.
And I'm on a back-to-back rotation, which means that there's another captain who's usually the same guy every time,
Okay.
and he comes back, takes over from me once I've done my 3 months,
Yep.
and then once I've had my 3 months at home, I go back and I take over from him again, which makes everything much easier. We actually do that with the top four, so that's the captain, chief engineer, chief officer, and second engineer on our ships. And the great thing about that is you have continuity on board. So because the ship's so big, complex, so many things happening all the time,
Mm.
if you keep a few of the same people on board all the time, where did you leave the spanners? When did that order come in? What's happening with this email? What's happening with that? You can keep things rolling rather than new people coming all the time.
Yes.
So I do 3 months on, 3 months off, and then once I'm off, I'm at home. I'm off unless I have to do a little bit of training. From time to time, we have to do that
Okay.
through the company. Nothing this time. And then once I go back on board, the rotation for this ship, so I'm on the same ship almost all the time. Sometimes I have to change. I've changed twice in the last 5 years. So now I'm on the Maersk Hildago, and she goes from the Far East around the Cape up to Egypt and up to the Adriatic, Italy, Croatia, and Slovenia, which is a very nice part of the world. Yeah,
Cool.
even in winter, it's very nice. So quite happy with that run. I've been on that for a while now. And then
Yeah.
when we're back in the Far East, it's quite a few ports in China, one in Korea, China again, and Singapore. We used to go to a few of the Middle East ports as well, but now because the company has closed the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden for
Yes.
us, we don't go through there anymore. So we have to go the long way around. So,
Yes, of course, of the
yeah.
security situation, which I would like to ask you about as well,
Mm.
in a few minutes. But
Yeah.
where would you be embarking and disembarking on that type of journey?
So I'll embark in Singapore.
Yeah.
So this next time it'll be Singapore, but it
Yeah.
depends. It's just whenever the time is up in the next most convenient port.
Okay.
So the company will fly me out from my home here in Cork, fly out to Singapore. I'll usually have a day in a hotel to try and get over a little bit of the jet lag, and then join the ship once she comes in. And then it's a few hours, half a day to hand over. It's quite easy for us because we're doing back to back, so it's the same guys over and over. And then my back to back signs off, and that's me. I take the keys, and I'm back in charge again. Yeah.
And you take the con, as they say in the films.
Yeah, that's it.
You
Yeah.
take the con. And you have just described it, but for people who don't know, I mean, the company is paying for you to do that travel. That's all included, and that is basically from your place of residence on board the ship, and the reverse, at the other
Exactly.
end when you're disembarking. Let's say in this example is in Croatia, isn't it? And that
Yeah,
again is
correct. Yeah,
all regulated as part of the Maritime Labour Convention.
That's right. Yeah. Makes a
Yeah.
big difference for
Makes a
sure.
huge difference.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we've talked a little bit about your living conditions, and we know that you're working for Maersk, and it's one of the biggest operators in the world, and you've got, fabulous conditions on board ship. But how do you, kind of personally manage, I guess, your kind of work schedule, your sleep schedule? How do you chill out, relax on board?
I'm a bit of a gamer. I enjoy the
Okay.
game. I occasionally make my way down to the gym as well,
Yeah.
and uh, I like to do a lot of reading. I do crosswords. Generally keep myself to myself most of the time. The guys might be doing a games night. We have bingo nights sometimes, and we have card games and all that in the
Yeah.
evening. But I spend quite a bit of my time working.
Yeah. Well,
So
yeah.
my morning usually starts 7 o'clock. We have morning meetings with the
Okay.
top four,
Mm-hmm.
which is, as I said, the chief engineer and the second engineer and the chief mate. The chief mate would be up on watch on the bridge. So it's pretty informal. We just have a
Mm-hmm.
cup of coffee and then we go for breakfast. And then my day starts from there. And depending on what time zone I'm in, I'll have a lot of emails.
Mm.
The captain's job is mostly admin these
Right.
days.
Right.
Huge There's a huge amount of admin that goes with ships, although a lot of it is being automated more and more, thankfully.
Okay.
Um, and then I'm just around throughout the day. I do a few inspections, and we've always got something coming up in the pipeline, got orders to do. Um, Something will always pop up every day. Somebody will pick up the phone and say, "Oh, we need help doing this," or "We need some advice doing that," or there'll be a meeting with our superintendents on the shore side. And then I usually have a little break in the afternoon. And if we're on the sea passages, I like to go up to the bridge and do 1 or 2 hours watchkeeping myself, so the chief officer can actually get out on deck at the end of the day, because he's in
Right.
charge of all the deck maintenance, check up on the guys before they start knocking off before dinner time. And it just helps me keep my eye in as well and see how things are going up on the bridge, and do a little bit of navigating. Yeah. And then after dinner, it's usually a little bit more admin or free time or whatever I want. And by
Yeah.
10 o'clock in the evening, I'm usually done. But then when you're
Wow.
arriving, departing, it depends on your run. So
Yeah.
if you have around the Chinese coast, it could be extremely busy. So I might have to be up to help the navigator if they've got very heavy traffic, just to be another set of eyes or a little bit of support, standing back in the shoulder.
Yep.
And then we have port arrival departure. So I'm always on the bridge for maneuvering whenever we're taking the ship in
Mm.
and out of port. And
Mm.
that could be, sometimes it could be 2 hours, or it could be 7 or 8 hours, sometimes depending if
Mm.
we're going up a river or whatever. So I always have to be
Mm.
there for it.
And it
So
could
you
be
have to
any time of
manage
the day
your
or night, couldn't it, as
any
well?
time of the day or night,
Mm.
24/7.
Mm. Mm.
Any time of day, night, any conditions really. We have to be there and on time. That's the main
Mm.
thing with a
Mm.
liner service, is
Mm.
to be on time and on schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't mind it, and then I'm able to take my rest afterwards. And because we have the MLC regulations regarding rest hours, so it's
Yes.
not the hours that you work, it's the hours that you rest that are the
Yes.
most important part.
Yes.
And so you have to plan a lot of that very strictly. And then if you're going to be a little bit tired the next day, I have the advantage of being able to knock off, and because I'm not taking a watch in port or
Yes.
anything like that, so I can have a little bit of rest.
You can
And
get your
that's
rest in. Yeah.
that's my
Yeah.
basic day, a very basic day.
Yeah. So typically, I mean, tell me if I've heard this wrong. Typically, it would be like a 7 to 10, but you'll get a break at some stage, maybe in the afternoon.
Yeah,
And that's when you're at sea. And that might change up when you're coming in and out of port, because you've got a lot more operations going on, and you
yeah,
may be
exactly.
required to kind of step in for an extra couple of hours, or do something in middle of the night because you're coming in at 3 a.m. or something like that. Yeah.
You have to be very flexible. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, sounds like it. But you're not doing a watch, so you're not like in charge of the bridge overnight, say between
No.
1 and 4 or something. Yeah.
No, because we have a third mate, a second mate, and
Mm.
a chief officer who are the
Mm.
watch keepers on our
Mm.
ships. The way they
Mhm.
do it on the big container ships is like that. And you might have a few cadets knocking around as well, but they can't keep watches. So they're just up there as for trainees. And
Mhm.
then if somebody really needs it, if somebody's a little bit tired, I'm always there available. Let's say we've had a really long port stay or a really late night getting out. Somebody's feeling a bit fatigued, they could just give me a call and I'll come up for a couple of hours and take over and let them go get some rest. And that's how we keep
Yeah.
it flexible and nice and easy. Long ago, before MLC, even when I was a young junior officer, and that rest hours were not something that were really important to people, and you could
Right.
end up working huge hours, 24 hours straight and all this kind of stuff, and which is incredibly unsafe. Anybody
Yeah.
who's ever driven a car tired knows how bad it is. Try doing it with something as large as a container ship. So we take it very seriously, and I always make sure the guys get as much rest as possible. It's one of the most important things out there.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear, actually. I guess you hear a lot of bad news stories, don't you? When something goes wrong, often the finger of blame is pointed at the people who are on board ship, and it's often suggested it's because they're fatigued, and they probably are fatigued
Yeah.
because they may be on a very different shift pattern to what you have described, and we know how dangerous fatigue is.
Yes, that comes down to management, making sure that you manage the vessel well, and giving the juniors and the ratings and everything the backup, and allowing them to be able to step forward and say, I'm feeling really tired, or my rest hours are going to be violated if I keep going, and then you just say, okay, we'll get somebody to cover you, or I'll cover you, or whatever we can do.
Find a
And
solution.
it's find a solution, and it's totally down to safety. Absolutely, if you manage it correctly, you can do it without any great hardship.
Yeah, well, that's really good to hear. Thank you.
Yeah.
You mentioned a little while ago that the role of a captain is a lot of admin. You deal with a lot of emails, but that a lot of it is starting to be automated. How is that role of the captain kind of evolving and changing with the introduction of new technology such as AI or automation? And perhaps how is maritime regulation affecting that?
Well, I guess not. Regulation side, I think it's slow catching up, as it can be sometimes
Right.
in the maritime industry. It does take a little while for the regulations to catch up, especially in the digital age we're in now.
Yeah.
From a operational point of view, a huge amount of data is sent from the ships now to the shore side, because there is a massive push now for decarbonization
Yeah.
and fuel saving, which is by far and away the heaviest cost. And of course, that cost is pushed onto the customer as well. So it has to be reduced if everybody wants to stay competitive. And being able to crunch the data ashore and be able to tell us, okay, this is where we might be slipping on this voyage, or is there a reason why all these generators are running when they should be or shouldn't be? Some people are not that into it, because it's a bit like, it can seem like interference from the shore side. I don't
Right.
take it that way at all. It's better for us to be as efficient as possible, because we're all in favor of going green, shall we say, as much as the industry can, because we all know it's a very heavy polluter, and we need to be pushing forward very, very quickly now to get down to targets that are being set around the world. So
Absolutely.
I do think it is of benefit, and the less emails I have to send, the better as well.
Well, I think anyone listening to this podcast, watching this podcast, will agree with that. Email
Yeah.
is just kind of crazy these days,
Yes,
isn't it? It's just
it is.
nonstop. Yeah. But one of the videos that you posted relatively recently actually looked at fuel usage on board ship, and I found this was one of the most fascinating ones that I watched. And you were showing the difference between, I think it was a headwind and non-headwind in fuel consumption over a period of time. And it increased quite dramatically, with that headwind there. I was fascinated by that. And that just, again, it goes to decarbonization, but it goes to costs on board ship as well, doesn't it? And these are the type of issues that you're dealing with all the time.
Yeah, and having correct data now for like weather, for
Mm,
example, and being able to plan your passages, like having really great weather predictions, current predictions, which we use
yep.
an awful lot,
Yep.
that can save you, over, let's say, the 3 months I'm at sea, that could be hundreds of tons, which the
Yeah.
carbon alone and the cost alone
Yeah.
is massive. And then you
Huge.
multiply that across the fleets around the world, it's a huge amount. And then you
Yeah.
also have things like idling time, so that we're able to plan our passages correctly, so that we come at the correct speed at all the time and arrive just on time,
Mm-hmm.
instead of turning up early and then you're just burning fuel unnecessarily,
Yeah.
or you're going to be a little bit late and you have to put the hammer down, and again, you're spending a lot of fuel. And because it's like
Yeah.
the ship, my engine is 75,000 horsepower, I think, something like that. So when she's going at her maximum, you're burning 8 tons an hour. It's a huge
It's
amount of fuel.
mad. Yeah.
Yeah, and you could be
Yeah.
burning that for days and days. So
Yeah.
you really want
Yeah.
to, every kilo makes a difference, and that's why we're pushing so hard now to be as economical as possible and crunch the data and get the numbers and have the most how we say, fuel efficient passages that you can do as safely as possible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it sounds like you really understand the benefit of getting that data regularly and being able to maximize. That's probably not the right word that I'm looking for. Get the best journey out of your ship to
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you're trying to get as much you're trying to get as container as far as you can per gram of fuel that you're using.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating, really, really fascinating stuff. If we were doing a podcast just on decarbonisation, it could go for a couple of hours just on its own, couldn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, for
Absolutely
sure.
huge issue in the industry at the moment, but we're not. So we're going to move on to another question here now. So you mentioned also at the top of the podcast that the journey that you're on at the moment is going from the Far East and around the Cape, which is the Cape of Good Hope, South Africa, and then through, would it be the Suez Canal, and
Uh,
then
no, we go up through Gibraltar, in
Gibraltar
through, yeah, and across the Mediterranean, and then we
across the
arrive in
Med?
Port
Yep.
Said at the north side of Egypt. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
on the north,
yeah.
but we don't use the Suez at the moment.
You're not using the Suez, but the reason that you're doing that journey is because you're also not going through the Red Sea because of the security situation there. And I just
Yeah.
wanted to ask you a little bit about that. I mean, obviously, really great that the company is taking security really seriously and the safety of its employees and its vessels as well. How does it affect you day to day? Do you think about it much? Is it, something that's on your mind, on your colleagues' mind?
Well, before we went through there,
Yeah,
we were going through there for a while, and it was becoming a little bit sketchy, and it was something that you would lose sleep over.
yeah.
As the whole thing was beginning to evolve a couple of months ago. And then it was my trip earlier this year when we were heading south towards Egypt, and at the last minute they decided, no, the Red Sea is going to be closed off.
Mm,
We had cargo for ports in the Middle East, and it all had to be offloaded in Port Said to be put on
right,
feeder ships that
right.
would take it through the Suez and down through like that. So it was there was a collective sigh of relief on board the ship, because everybody can be quite stiff upper lip about it, I suppose, and just
Mm,
go, oh well, we've got to do it, and that's our job, and
mm,
let's just kind of get on with it. But you could tell that people were a bit nervous, and I was a bit nervous because my first responsibility is for the safety of the crew and that, and I just wanted to make sure everybody was safe, and if anybody had any reservations about it, they could come forward with it. So then when they said, no, you're not going through anymore, we were able to go around the Cape, and then it was like, oh, we can plan a barbecue now as we'll be sailing through the Mediterranean.
happy
you know,
days, happy
yeah,
days.
a kind of a selfish response to it, but a natural response nonetheless, because of course it's costing the company a huge amount of money to go around that way, a huge amount of fuel. At this point, quite a lot of customers for a while, until a lot more assets were juggled around and moved from other places to put onto the route to fill that gap that was going to be there for a couple of months, which I think is pretty much filled now. But it is
Yeah.
an extra 2 weeks onto your journey, so it's
Yes.
30 days from Egypt to Singapore and back around again. So
Yes. Yeah.
quite a long trip. Yeah.
Quite a long trip. So, I mean, obviously that does affect you and the rest of the crew. That's longer time away from friends and family, isn't it? Longer time on board ship. What accommodations do you make for that,
Oh,
if any?
well, actually, your trip time
Mm.
doesn't change,
Oh,
because
right.
you still do your contracted time. So wherever you end up once your contract is finished, that's when you're going to sign off. So the only trouble is now
Right.
we don't have as much flexibility, because you've got that big 30-day passage. You have to either get off in Singapore, like I'm due to get off on the 19th of December,
Yep.
which is very close to Christmas.
It
And if I don't get
really
off
is.
then, I won't be getting off until the 20th of January.
Oh
So,
no.
so all the stars have to kind of align, but
Yeah.
that's the job. That's where
Yeah.
we're used to that kind of thing, and we hope for the best. You know, that the schedule doesn't change too much. So there isn't a huge change for everybody on board.
Mm.
You still just go about your job as normal, but we have that added security now that we're not going through this very high risk area. And there has been a bit of an uptick in piracy in the area around Somalia and that as well, because they've kind
Right.
of been emboldened a little bit by what's been happening to Houthis, and there's more kind of opportunities, I guess. That's what we've been
Right.
hearing from the security side. So
Mm.
avoiding that completely as well is much better for us too. So,
Absolutely. And I'm sure you will know if you've been listening to our podcast that our very first one was with the real Captain Phillips from the super duper Hollywood film. But, you know, he
mhm.
was captured by pirates off a Maersk ship, Maersk tanker ship it was, many years ago. And, you know, we wouldn't wish that experience on anybody. It's
No.
very, very harrowing
Yes, it is
situation he
indeed.
found himself in. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've sailed with crew who have been captured by pirates before as well, and it's
Right.
not something that anybody would want to go through. No, no,
No,
absolutely not.
absolutely not.
So,
Okay.
and now that you have the security situation duty, there are still companies that are putting ships through there. There are some that
Mm.
are being escorted by military.
Mm,
It's a huge
mhm,
area of sea. It's
mhm.
the Bab el Mandeb, which is that really close point between Somalia, Yemen, and there. That's the choke point, shall we say?
Yes. Yes.
Um, so you have your options there, and the option that our company has taken has been, let's just avoid it completely. You know.
Yes. No, absolutely. You're right. There is still shipping going through the area. It's a very busy waterway, isn't it? If I
Yeah,
can call it a waterway. I know that's underplaying it a bit.
yeah, yeah. So,
But a lot of oil and gas shipping, obviously off the north of Africa, sorry, and
yeah.
the Middle East.
And there's this big military presence there now.
Mm,
It's the biggest military presence, I think, since the Gulf War.
right.
So there's a huge amount of navies from all over the world
Mm,
there trying to protect ships,
mm,
and still occasionally ships are being hit and being attacked.
mm,
So
mm,
it you have to weigh up the options and
mm.
go, is it really worth it? And
Yep.
for us, it's not. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's really good to hear. And we as a trade union would obviously support that position. And that is our recommendation as well to any members and employers of our members, you know, to avoid the area if at all possible. So, yeah,
yeah,
thank you for
I would agree.
describing that. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, these really serious situations that we've just been discussing. Can you kind of share with us any specific examples of when you have had to make a critical decision, you know, whilst you were in charge of one of these massive, massive container ships?
You know, I've been captain now for just over 5 years, and I've
Mm,
been pretty lucky. Everything has gone very smoothly for me. Yeah,
yeah, fingers
touch wood.
crossed. It
Uh,
continues.
it really has. Yeah, yeah. I've had two of these ships. They're both sister ships, and been in command of both. And we've had our few ups and downs, but nothing massive has
Yeah,
plagued me. It's always just been about being on time, and it's a constant learning experience. You know, there's always something's going to pop up. You do an operation one way. We have our toolbox talks and all that kind of stuff, but I always
mm,
have my own little toolbox talk in
mm,
my own head about how I do it, and I keep my notes. And next time it comes around, I try to do it a little bit better if I can. It can be anything as simple as mooring or anchoring, or working out the times that you're going to be anywhere, or following this current at that time of year. All kinds of stuff. There's so much
mm,
learning in this job that you
mm.
can be at it 40 years, and it's still the day that you're going to be signing off the ship, there's going to be something that pops up. I was only thinking about Ningbo the other day, because there was, I don't know if people might have recently seen, there was an accident there on a container ship. There was
Yes,
quite a big explosion just a few days
explosion.
ago,
That's right.
and we call there quite regularly, and it's a tricky port because it's usually very poor weather there in that part of China. You get a lot of fog, or you get the typhoon season going up there, but mostly fog,
Mm,
and it's extremely congested. If any, go on to Marine Insight or any of the marine following apps, and you can see the amount of ships that are sitting outside that whole area there. It's huge.
yeah.
But whenever we get in, there is a secondary anchorage up at the northern end of the container port, and they managed to get us in one evening, in the cover of darkness. just as the fog had lifted.
Mm.
And then they said, you'll have to anchor here for a few hours because it's a huge river and the currents are just too strong. You can't just sit around and drift and wait. So they said, you'll have to wait a few hours for your berth to clear. There's a ship on your berth. You'll have to wait for her to go out so that you can go in. So you'll drop anchor here. And I could see on the chart there is a power cable running along exactly where they wanted us to drop the anchor. So I was like, I don't think we can drop anchor here because we might shut down the power for the city or something, you know, this is somewhere safer. And then there was a lengthy discussion that the cable wasn't actually there anymore. So I had to get speak to the harbour master and get letters from him and long discussions and everything to make sure that it actually wasn't there before. And we anchored actually quite a little bit away just to be safe. And it turned out that it had been removed about 2 years beforehand, but the charts weren't being updated. So you have those kind of things to do at 3 o'clock in the morning, all while you're waiting in a river, trying to hold the ship in position to make sure that you're not going in the right spot because there's nowhere else to go because you've already come in now and the ship is a certain size, so there's nowhere to put her. So yeah, so there's these kind of little stressful moments that pop up from time to time, and it all works out fine in the end. So you just kind of gotta keep a cool head and
Do you know what? I got quite stressed hearing that story. I was like, what?
Always check the chart is the moral of the story. So,
but you did check the charts, and it hadn't been updated, so therefore all the additional work that you needed to do.
Yeah. And you just have to be always be safe rather than sorry. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely mad. I can just picture like something, your anchor going down, and then suddenly, a whole city.
Or you're heaving it up and there's a cable lying across it and it's like, oh dear. Yeah, this could get expensive.
Well, that's the exact thought that I had as well. Here comes the insurance claim.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. I mean, Ningbo, it is not a city that I think many people watching, listening to this pod would have thought about. I mean, you've done videos about Shanghai, that absolutely massive, massive port there, which is an island in itself, isn't it? That was repurposed just to be a container port.
The Yangshan deep water port. Yeah, absolutely colossal.
Absolutely colossal. So definitely check out your TikTok video on that one. That is just so eye-opening in itself. I mean, what can we talk about your videos now and your social media presence? As I've said, I absolutely love it. Your videos are really entertaining, but also really interesting from a technical point of view, and really does lift the lid on the maritime industry in the type of way that we would like to do with this podcast as well. What got you into it? What got you first started doing the social media content?
I would always get asked the same questions every time you come home. First of all, it's always as soon as you get home is when are you going away again? That's ask any seafarer. That's always the first question you get asked.
But that's just the family, right?
How long are you around for? That's it.
When you're buggering off.
And then you just be down the pub and people would ask you questions, or the kids would be asking you questions and this and that. And it's a little bit difficult to explain. Then one guy said to me, "You should write a book," and I said, "I don't think I have a book in me, to be honest. Writing a book isn't that easy." So, but making a video these days on TikTok is extremely easy. If I can do it, anybody can do it. That's for sure.
Okay.
And I just kind of kept it. I don't go back and look at the early ones because I would be cringing now because I've been doing it for 2.5 years and it's evolved a little bit. But it was just one of those things I thought maybe the grandkids could watch it. People at home could watch it. I didn't know if it was going to take off at all, and then I had like 500 followers and I was like, oh wow. And then then it's 10,000 and they're like, oh wow, this is getting quite serious. Then I had to send a little message to the company saying, by the way, I've got quite a few followers on social media now. They were like, it's fine, no problem. There's loads of people doing it as long as you keep the company in a decent light and you're not showing us up naturally, and I'm like, no problem, you're still paying my wages, so I will be as nice as Polly, don't worry. And then it just got traction, and it's just been growing and growing ever since. And it's been an extremely positive space. And I just keep doing it now because I really enjoyed it. That's my hobby. I spend a lot of time doing that in the evenings, of even picking up music. And sometimes you can be creative, sometimes it's just technical stuff, sometimes it's me just fooling around and being a bit of an Egypt, so it's just something to do, and people are really, really positive. I know
Yeah.
social media can be a tricky space. Sometimes these days it can be a hellscape for some people, but I
Mm.
found it to be extremely positive, and people are very respectful and really
Yes.
interested. And people pop up with questions and go, "What about this? And what about that?" And that gives me
Yes.
more ammo for my content then.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, yeah,
mm,
yeah. I mean, it definitely is a really positive space. I was looking at some of the comments, and people just seem to be really inquisitive and really interested in what you're doing and what it's like to work at sea. And you're also finding the time to respond, which is amazing. I mean,
yeah, I try
given,
to. I used to respond
yeah,
more, but sometimes you get 1,000 comments and you'd be like, "Oh, thanks and everything." I used to, try and give them all a little like, and
yeah,
I
yeah,
try to
yeah,
engage with people as much as possible because it is
yeah.
it is just me. And then sometimes you meet people on the street and they're like, "Oh, it's you," and it's like, "Yeah, it's just me. It's no big deal. I'm just a person as well." So.
Yeah. So you're getting recognized on the street now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Get
Yeah.
recognized occasionally on the streets. We got recognized. My son and I were in London, of all
Yeah.
places. We got
Yeah.
recognized. We were going to a gig, and there was the Arsenal football match was spilling out onto the street, and somebody spotted me there, and so I must be doing all
Wow.
right now. I get spotted in that kind of crowd, So
Oh, that's very cool, and I'm really glad that you were near the Arsenal because we might be an Arsenal house here in
oh,
North London, showing our stripes now, as it were. But I mean, how would you describe your style of videos for anybody who hasn't seen them?
I suppose it's kind of well, the way I shoot them is a little bit gonzo. Some people are like they'll script it and they'll plan
Yeah,
it out and
yeah,
everything.
yeah.
I just kind of get an idea in my head and I said, well, if I talk about this, that, and the other, and then I just go off and I shoot it. And it's all done on my phone. I have no special equipment or cameras or microphones or anything like that. I just keep it all pretty natural and just talk about technical stuff and whatever pops into my head. And for some reason, people seem to enjoy listening to it. Inexplicably, they seem to enjoy it.
It's
So
because you're very natural. You're very natural, and it's we kind of feel
thank
like
you.
we know you, from the way that you
Yeah,
present
thanks
it.
very
And
much.
yeah, that's my pleasure. I think one of the ones that I really enjoyed, and it's because of my own personal interest, I follow the ocean's cleanup.
Mm,
So, which
they're
if
brilliant.
people, yeah, they're brilliant. But if anybody doesn't know them, they're a group that basically goes out on vessels and collects lots of plastic and other debris from the oceans. But I think they're also doing some rivers as well.
That's
I
right.
follow a number of these similar type of operations, and I know that you've posted at least one, if not multiple, videos about plastics in our oceans and as
Yeah.
well. And it's a
So
terrible situation.
it's stuff that interests me as well, or that
Mm.
I want to kind of give a bit of traction to, and technical stuff on the ships. And then just a few funny bits. And then if I have a pretty sunset and a piece of music that I want to use, I post stuff like that as well. And
Yeah,
that's to keep me interested as well. Now, I enjoy doing that, being a little bit creative from time to time
yeah,
is always good. So
yeah. Well, they definitely work. They definitely work.
thank
And
you.
again, I encourage people to follow you and to engage with the content as well. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
thank you.
as I've said a couple of times now, the reason we launched this pod really is to try and tackle what we call sea blindness. So, this kind of lack of awareness about the maritime industry and how important it is to all of our lives. And your videos are definitely helping to do this. Was that intentional, or is that like a happy byproduct
It
of the
it, it
content?
definitely, I suppose it was kind of intentional in a
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
without putting into so much work because people had asked me so many questions, and they were the first ones that I covered, and then it kind of ballooned from there, and then but the realization kind of came to me as well is that people actually don't know what's happening on ships at
Yeah.
all,
Yeah.
even the most basic stuff, and that can be. I also get messages from people who have family in the maritime industry, who have cadets going off or have a husband or a wife or something like that who's an officer or rating or whatever, and they say it's great to see this because now we're getting more of a perspective about what our family or our friends are doing in their day-to-day lives because they disappear off on the plane, and then you get a few calls or whatever, a few emails and FaceTimes and stuff, and then they come back, and you never really get to see the inside story of what
Mm.
it's like just to even just moving around on board a ship, day to day lives, what we eat, where we sleep, how long the hours can be, the good and the bad of it. I try to keep it mostly on the good side because there is an awful lot of pretty negative stuff online. So I like to,
Yeah.
for my own self, keep it pretty positive. There is some things that pop up that you can't hide. Or you don't want to hide. Well, hide is probably the wrong word, but they just happen. Um, so I like to keep it pretty honest as well. I don't, give any guff. And if people ask me straight questions, I always give them straight answers.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
the way
Yeah.
it's gone, and it seems to work. And
Yeah.
people can smell the bullshit anyway. So if you if
People can definitely smell the bullshit. This is
yeah,
very
yeah,
true.
you
Yeah.
can only there's only so you see influence online, they always get found out. If you
Yeah.
if you post stuff that's nonsense, it always just pops up. So it's better to just keep it honest from the beginning, and then
Yeah.
people trust you and they trust your content,
Yeah.
and then you can be a go-to person, to ask questions
Yeah.
and give them straight answers. Yeah, so
Absolutely.
that's really
Who
important.
who do you follow on social media? What other
Well,
maritime influencers, shall we say, do you follow?
oh, Katie McHugh,
Oh,
she's
she's
a
amazing.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
she's on the cruise ships. Captain
Uh-huh.
Thomas, also Lingard, he's another Mars
Yes,
captain.
he is.
Freshwater Mariner is another guy. He's
Ooh, I'll
a
check
is
him
he
out.
is he chief officer? Is he chief officer? That I think he might be. He's on a big coal carrier up in the Great Lakes because I've
Nice.
never get the chance to go up to the Great Lakes, so he's sailing all the way around there.
Yeah, this is
The
the
Ocean
US and
King.
Canada.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
I follow a few of the crane drivers in Los Angeles, just like Crane Daddy. He does a lot of stuff about the maritime industry in the US and the ports in the US and regulations, and he's into the unions and all that
Yep.
there as well.
Yeah.
And then there's his colleague Stamino. They're both crane drivers and they do a lot of stuff around the ports. So it's interesting to see their side of our job as well, because we see them
Yes.
swinging around above us all the time, but we never actually
Yes.
get to interact with them. So it's great
Yeah,
to follow
yeah.
those kind of guys. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So there's quite a few out there that are posting really good content. Yeah, yeah. And there's a few guys. Oh God, Captain Niels, who's up. He drives a smaller kind of ore carrier now, but he's up in the German rivers and canals and stuff. So there's loads of
Mm.
guys around the place posting
Mm.
content. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Mm. Well, I have to check out Captain Neil's because our Swiss branch, we have a Swiss branch alongside the UK and our Netherlands branch as well, and we have a lot of members in the inland waterway sector.
Mm.
So yeah, he could be somebody of real interest for us. So thank you
Captain
for that tip.
Niels Captain Niels Schofield, I think. I hope I haven't got his name incorrect there now, but yeah,
If
yeah,
you
yeah,
have, we'll correct it in our show notes for you. No
yeah,
problem.
and it,
Yeah.
and it's mostly in German as well, which I don't speak German, but I liked
Right.
watching them driving the boats.
Right. Yeah, yeah. You can get an idea of what they're doing without
Yeah,
hearing the
and you can
audio.
translate most of it these days as well. So
Of course you can. Well, they're great tips. Thank you very much. I will definitely be checking out all of those people. Can I wrap it up with
sure.
perhaps some encouragement, or would you encourage young people to get into the maritime industry? And if so, what are kind of some of the reasons why you would encourage somebody to run away to sea these days?
I definitely would, because you still can run away to sea if you want to run away to sea. It's still a popular option for a lot of people,
Yeah.
um, and it's a good option. You have to. I would recommend it to people, but with caveats. I always put caveats that it is not as physical as it was. We would say, well, definitely not in container ships, but it still can be very physical, especially engineering and that. You're
Okay.
working in very hot spaces, and it is mentally challenging. But now, thankfully, these days we have pretty quick internet. You're much more connected to the shore, and I
Yep.
know that's going to be a big factor for young people,
Yes.
because from a very young age now we're all connected. Everybody's online, and if you're heading off to sea, you're kind of expecting it to be the same way. For some people, having a little bit of a disconnect is actually quite a good thing. I know even for me, I don't post so much when I come home on social media, just to have a little break and
Yep.
get out in the garden and just chill out from it and that, because it can be pretty full on and non-stop, and you get a little bit addicted to it. So, but for young people who are thinking of heading off, if you want something that's, they say, a little bit left field, unusual, um, very technical and ever changing and ever challenging, is definitely one of those jobs that would appeal to somebody who has that kind of mindset. If you want
Yeah.
to see the world, I mean, I've been to about 60 countries. A lot of people will say, but you don't get to see 60 countries, but I got to walk at the Great Wall of China. I've been through the gates of India. I've been up in Table Mountain in South Africa. All those things
Yeah.
I would never have got to done, get to do unless I had gone to sea.
Yeah.
So there is definitely those benefits in it, and you meet some fantastic people when you're at sea as well. And sometimes you get opportunities to podcasts and meet lovely people. Yeah, and it could be one of those jobs that there's been times where I'm like, oh, I don't know if am I going to pack it in? Can I keep at it? And then you just have to, knock it out. But every job is like that at some point, I think, where you kind of go, should I really still be here? And you're
Yeah.
just stuck at it. And eventually, you can make it to captain, chief engineer or whatever.
Yeah.
And then it becomes just another life. And it's something that I really enjoy. And there's quite a few young guys here in my village who have gotten into it now. They're working offshore on the tenders for wind farms, which is a huge industry at the moment. Because
Absolutely huge.
if you don't want to go deep sea like I do, you can go work on the wind farm tenders. So they do 3 weeks, I think. You can do like 3 weeks on, 2 weeks off, something like that, depending on the company. Excuse me. Offshore industry, still oil and gas and that. You've got the yacht industry, cruise ships, which are massive. They need a lot of people on the cruise ships. There's more of a, so we say, if you were young, single, and had more of a kind of a party atmosphere on board, that might be something that
That might
a
suit
route that
you.
that people might go down. And if you want the more quiet life, and if you want to be able to save a few bob and that, the deep sea is the better option for people. So there's something out there. The industry is massive.
Yeah.
People think you just go on ships and you're going to be, on this one, a tanker and then a container ship or whatever. There's so many different ones out there, and you can get really technical and really specialist and be on like cable layers or, deep sea ROV, all sorts of things. There's so much out there, such a massive industry. And then there's
Yes.
the options afterwards for management, projects, you don't have to be just, bobbing about, staring out the window or down in the engine room with a spanner in your hand. There's huge opportunities there.
I mean, there really is. And we have spoken to some amazing people so far on this podcast. We have had a chef on a super yacht. I've spoken with a cadet with the Royal Fleet Auxiliary. I've spoken with a colleague of yours, perhaps, who used to be Maersk Containers, has now gone over to Maersk Tankers. So, I mean, such a range of jobs and opportunities available at sea. And I really hope you stay at sea for a bit longer so we can keep consuming your content, because it is
Yeah, me too. Well, I've no plans to
absolutely
change for a while
fascinating.
anyway.
Great.
Not for a while.
Good news. Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Captain Mark, so much for spending the time to speak with us today. We really appreciate it. And we wish you all the best in your coming journey. And we hope you get home for Christmas.
Thank you. My pleasure. Me too.
The industry is massive, people. I think, Robert, I'm going to take that away as my quote from today's pod. What about you?
Yeah, there's so much. I think for me, the big thing, again, I think it's a data point, it's a statistic, but I think it paints a bigger picture, which was this statistic that you could fit 7,500 lorries onto, I think it was 7,500. I think I'm right in saying that, onto onto one of these ultra container ships. I mean, just think of that, right? Think about when you're in your car driving down the road, driving down the motorway, and you see these lorries going past, and think of 7,500 of those lorries. I mean, it is just ginormous. Going back to, it's massive, people. The industry is massive, but so are the ships.
The ships are massive, and half of what are on board them are below deck, so we can't even see how massive it is. So, I mean, look, you heard it from Captain Mark. There are still so many options for people who genuinely want to run away to sea. And we know there's lots of them out there. I mean, it's a great career. He's been doing it for over 20 years and he's seen the world. He's, been to the Great Wall of China. He has, been to Australia and beyond. There are so many good reasons for joining the maritime industry and running away to sea.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that I also really liked about Captain Mark was he touched on some of the things that we talk a lot about in Nautilus. So one of the things that you mentioned in the podcast, Helen, that we had a hand in creating was the Maritime Labour Convention.
Yep.
And it's great to hear from Captain Mark about how much of a difference that has actually made. We know there have been issues. We talked in previous podcast episodes. If you go back to our episode on flags of convenience, where we talked about the Maritime Labour Convention and some of the issues, particularly during the pandemic. But I think there's no doubt that it has been a force for good. And I think it's really heartening for us to hear that from Captain Mark. And then other stuff around the decarbonisation point, which I think is a big issue that we're talking about, this idea of the just transition. But I think it's really interesting to hear how they're feeling it on the coalface. The fuel efficiency, been really planning everything. This idea of people are watching why generators are on, 3 generators at one time, all the rest of it. But I also think it chimes with some of the other survey work that we've done, Helen, which is that actually on a whole we did our mapping our maritime future survey, and what we discovered from that survey, and there's some really important points, and obviously we'd encourage listeners to go and read that report. But one of the things is that actually most of the respondents of that survey, most of our members support decarbonisation of the industry. And I think, again, as what Captain Mark was saying, there is support, there is a recognition that we have to, do our bit to support towards climate change, to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. But obviously, it's also really important that that is just and human-centred, which is central to one of our missions in Nautilus as well. So I just thought it was really interesting listening to Captain Mark, who was talking about some of the stuff that we talk a lot about in Nautilus, where you're looking at it maybe from the campaigning and policy side, and he's looking at it from the coalface. And ultimately success comes when those two things chime together. So I find that really heartening actually as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really came through very strongly in our Mapping Our Maritime Future survey that our members and members of the Nautilus Federation do really support moves to decarbonisation. They also recognise that there will be more automation, more digitalisation of vessels, of their workload. And whilst they grab that wholeheartedly, where it reduces their workload and enables them to take their rest time, their hours of work and rest, where they don't support it is where it, just adds to workload or potentially leads employers to cutting down more on the workforce. So it was really interesting to hear from Captain Mark, his experience of that automation, and he's really somebody who's embracing it, isn't he?
Exactly. And I think the other one for me, Helen, just also to say, was the other example was the Red Sea, because I find it quite emotive when he said about that collective sigh of relief whenever they got the news that they weren't transiting through. And we know that obviously that creates other complexities, but actually, while there was that stiff upper lip,
yes,
stiff upper lip attitude amongst the crew. I guess maybe not wanting to confront some of the concerns about transiting through that area. But again, it's something from our side, in terms of the work that Nautilus has done with engaging with with ship owners, engaging with the UK government, engaging internationally, engaging with the press to highlight the safety concerns. And so again, when he said about that collective sigh of relief of the crew, I guess for me as a staff member at Nautilus, and I think for all of us, it makes it worthwhile. You realize again, the work that we do on a day-to-day basis really does impact our members and impact the seafarers across the world. And so I thought that was a really really emotive point, actually.
Yeah, really powerful, wasn't it? And it does, again, bring us all the way back to our very first podcast episode when we spoke with the real Captain Phillips, who obviously went through a harrowing experience of being hijacked. Slightly different situation, of course, piracy off Somalia and the situation in the Red Sea at the moment. But ultimately, what it comes down to is employers putting their workers first and understanding the sanctity of human life and how important that is compared to the cost of goods or kind of energy and things like that on board the ship. So really heartening to hear that Maersk as an employer is obviously very aware of this and is protecting its crew alongside its vessel, but also really good to hear that it doesn't mean longer time at sea for the workforce. They are still completing generally, within their contracted period and disembarking and going home at the end of that period, which obviously is what we would support as a trade union.
Yeah, absolutely.
So on that note, if you are a maritime professional working at sea or ashore, we would love you to come and join us and our 20,000 members here at Nautilus. We can give you loads of protections in your workplace, including pay, conditions, and other protections as well. So I will put some notes in the show notes. I'll put some information in the show notes, I should say, and a link to our website so you can find out more and join us. I'll also put some links in the show notes to Captain Mark's social media. And thank you for watching, and we look forward to you joining us next time, Robert. We will see you next time too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.